Everybody, it is Sunday. As you know, we do not necessarily political every Sunday, 3 p.m., and we're on time.
Hey, my name is Lonnie Malone.
I didn't want to introduce Lonnie Malone today, so what I did was I took up time, just grabbed the mic, and I just decided to keep going.
We're not ready for Rod.
There he is.
Already starting. Okay.
There he is.
But we're not ready for Rod.
We're still kind of happy, man. We had a successful Governors Forum. Thank everybody that came out, supported. Names. What was that? Big fun. What was it? Productions and sound guys. Tell us, Quang. What was the name of the sound team?
Big Friendly.
Big Friendly
Productions.
Yeah. Big Friendly Productions. Big shouts out there to them again.
I got to get my audio from them, man. He did the podcast because we're getting ready to get on the big boys, iHeart, Google, and all of those.
Absolutely.
Good.
Thank him for that, man. Quang, who we're interviewing now, we're going to be interviewing him shortly. Also helped participated. Shantae Brown.
Jamiria Moore.
Heath Judge candidates. Heath Bohackle.
What is that? Councilwoman Scales, Councilwoman Sheila Tice,
right? Councilwoman Hoyt,
Councilman
John Hilliard.
First Mama was there.
First Mom was there. We love her.
Mama Woodfield.
She talked us good too. She talked, boy. She gave, I love her.
Yeah.
A lot of knowledge in that, man.
We had some NAACP members from around the state. We had Associated Press from around the state.
Absolutely.
Mayor Rufus Davis from Camilla, Georgia.
Yeah. So great turnout. It was everywhere about 225 somewhere in there, Julie. You think? Maybe more.
JJ, I want to thank you, man, for the Fox News interview. My mom was calling all the friends, and they calling me, telling me, thank you and all that stuff.
The interview, the live stream on Fox 6, which is still on the website, which is cool. If anybody wants to see it, it's still.
And it was on Bounce TV.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing, somebody got mentioned on MSNBC.
Yeah.
Don't know who this guy is, but sound familiar when I heard the name.
Say he's
the first.
I'm not saying that.
But they said it, so I guess we can say
the Changing Alabama.
Alabama, the 21st century.
Cool. MSNBC did mention it. We thought that was pretty cool. We kind of broke it, so that's also always cool for us. But it's Quang, and he's running for State Rep District 55, right?
I am, yes.
Welcome in, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited for this for the past couple of weeks,
right.
And I appreciate y'all hosting the event on Monday. That was it was really fantastic.
Right, we appreciate it, man.
It's fantastic.
We appreciate you participating. I mean, really, not even really knowing us, taking a chance on us, like we said at the event. And when you do that, we take a chance on you.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
We welcome you in for that. But for the people who don't know who Quang is, who is Quang?
So I currently serve as an educator so my role is a little bit unique. So I teach both at Shades Valley High School as well as the Jefferson County International Baccalaureate Art School. So Shades Valley it's a zone-based school is what I like to say. So basically students who live in the Shades Valley District, and then JCIB being a county school, we take students from all over Jefferson County to the school. So I teach AP Human Geography for the IB freshmen, and I teach AP Government and Politics for my Shades Valley seniors. Prior to that, I was Advocacy and Policy Director for a local nonprofit. And then prior to that, I was a Student Affairs Practitioner at UAB. So I have a long list of stuff, and I've thrown out. I do
soccer.
I do, yes. So I've been coaching soccer for this is my 10th season, and then I'm also a coach for the Real Life Poets Youth Poetry Slam team. So John Paul Taylor invited me on board a year or two ago.
Wow, you know John?
I do, yeah. JP's my boy. He's actually just a shameless plug here. He's actually going to be speaking at our kickoff event on Wednesday. So I've known John for a long time now. Yeah.
You would not believe this. The very first poem he ever did was on the South Side in my brother's apartment. Is how long I've been knowing him.
Oh wow! So y'all go way back. Okay,
and
that's
he
what's
was
up.
like, "You think I should do this?" And I was like, "Hey,
do it." Hey, we keep talking
he
about poems. We're going to make somebody do a poem in here today.
It's amazing.
It's going to be the first, y'all.
It is amazing that you say that, but I know how long he's been doing this, how passionate he is about it. That's my man. Matter of fact, the event at Workplay was me hosting it at the time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah, so you know that he's Love that guy, man. But
and he really is a grassroots.
Really about the kids, man.
Yeah, and he is. He, really about the kids. And doing it right for him. I'm very privileged to call him a friend.
Absolutely.
And a colleague, certainly.
When they say Asian American, and you know, we get clarity here. Ethnicity, actually, when they say Asian American.
Yeah, so I'm glad you bring that up. So,
Absolutely.
So for me, that's such a really great way that you asked that, right? Because I think for a lot of Asian folks, it's, you know, where are you from?
Right.
And I'm like, well, my story's a little bit long. I mean, anyway, I'm from Birmingham.
Right.
You know, you could say I'm from California, but I was born in Vietnam.
Cool.
So I was born in Saigon, Vietnam. I came over to America when I was 4. So we moved to Southern California. And that at 12 years old, I moved to Birmingham. I always say, a lot of folks say, man, that must have been a culture shock for you to move from, you know, Vietnam to California.
Right.
I was like, not nearly as much as moving from California
to Birmingham.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always make the joke, it's like, you know, dropping me in the middle of a Duck Dynasty episode.
Right. You met Phil yet?
Say what?
You met Phil yet?
What do you mean?
You gotta watch Duck Dynasty. You know what Phil is?
Oh, no. Phil Forberson. Yeah. No, not yet. So that's not necessarily my demographic.
It's one of my favorite shows. That's why I'm like,
so how old are you, Quang?
So I'm 27.
27.
27, yeah.
Y'all got trying to run for state office.
Wow. What brought you to politics, man? Why politics? All this educational background. Why go through this?
So if I want to be very honest, you know, I'll tell y'all. Whenever folks ask me, you know, why you know, I'm in sort of progressive sort of organizing work. Again, being very honest, I remember the first time I stepped into the high school lunchroom in 9th grade. And I'm not saying that California doesn't have its own issues with race, right? Because when we talk about race, it's an issue globally. And I remember seeing a split between a literal line, right, between where the black kids were sitting and where the white kids were sitting. Right. And I remember thinking to myself, one, this is nuts, because you read about, right, you know, again, you read about it in textbooks, you read about it in the news and things like that, but it was very a front facial thing, right, when you see it in your face like that.
Right.
And really, you know, the school that I went to, I was the only individual who was, I would say, progressive is the wrong word, but who had sort of some democratic beliefs in terms of equality, in terms of racial equality, LGBTQ equality. So even early on, my beliefs and what I believed in, I felt that it was always important for me to build folks to go along with me. Right. So in college, it was really when I got into the organizing and political work. So I started the UAB College Democrats chapter at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I was privileged to work on President Obama's campaign in 2012. So I did a lot of college campus organizing. So we did a lot of things in terms of organizing students from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, and bringing them to sort of the swing states like North Carolina, Florida, and things like that to really push those votes. And so after 2012, I came back home. I worked in some local politics, the Jefferson County Democratic Party. But when the situation presented itself to be a student affairs practitioner at UAB, I realized that, and you know, I think when I first met Lonnie, what I love about, you know, what NNP stands for is I think there's a couple different ways you can approach politics, right? I think policy and legislation is important, but I think really having these conversations outside of the political realm, right? Because when we talk about social equity, when we talk about public school funding, when we talk about secondary education, all of these assets that are important to the success of our people doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, someone running for candidates. So so part of me taking the job at UAB was with the opportunity to, you know, to work with students of color, to work with marginalized students, to advocate for issues, not only on college campuses, but really giving the tool set to say, you can make this change, right? You, and one of the things, you know, President Obama came out last, I think, a couple days ago, and he said, you know, I've been waiting for you. Right, he's been waiting for our, you know, our youth to really step up and to have these conversations. So part of me sort of stepping away after President Obama's campaign is realizing that, you know, for us to get to a point where Doug Jones can be elected, and, you know, as a state senator, we have to build it sooner, right? And not only teach kids and young people how to build a movement, but also to be very cognizant in saying, if y'all leave us, we're losing this, right? Brain drain is, it's a big thing that we have in the South.
Well, that's really kind of spot on to what I've been preaching here for a while. Lonnie's kind of around my age, my generation. You're kind of like a young guy by quite a few years, and what we never were able to do was walk with our so-called teachers at the same time. It was always they teach, we follow.
Yeah.
Or eventually we get a position and then we teach and they follow. Now it's inclusion. And I think that's the 21st century identity that I've always wanted. Because there's a youthful element of knowledge that you can bring, and then there's a guidance element that 100%. Seniors can bring. Because, technology changes, things change. And sounds to me like you're inclusive, which is cool.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot in the classroom.
Right.
My students tell me all the time, they say, you're the first teacher that we've ever had who doesn't necessarily tell us, what to do or what to think, right. But more of like, here's the facts, right? We know what the Constitution says. We know the court cases that have led up to sort of the interpretation of the Constitution, but it's not my place to tell you what to believe or to not believe.
Absolutely.
We had a really fantastic conversation in the aftermath of the Florida school shooting. We had an issue of a gun threat at our school. It made some local news, and so that next day on Tuesday when we got back from President's Day, we had a class conversation in terms of what do y'all believe should be the steps that we need to address the situation. I was on a conference call, so I'm lucky to work with some national organizations. So while I was working at UAB, I also became nationally recognized as a social justice educator, and really using spoken word and poetry as a way to really start those conversations, right? And so I was telling them, there's a colleague I have in DC, and I thought this was just really powerful. He said, out of all the amendments in the Bill of Rights, right? You have the First Amendment, talking about freedom of speech. We have the freedom of speech because of the sacrifice of soldiers and patriots, who are going off and defending this. But the Second Amendment, right. The Second Amendment is really the only amendment that we are saving with the sacrifice of school children, right? With the blood and lives of school children. Right. And so we had that conversation, and I think it's important for us when we talk about empowering our students. I told them. I'm very frank with them in terms of here's how I view about things, just so you know where I'm coming from, so you can check me when I'm being biased in teaching you, right? And so for most of our students, and Shades Valley is a predominantly black school, and that's a whole other conversation that we can have about how it shifted into that. And I said, what do y'all think should be done? Because it's really your lives being on the line for the Second Amendment. And what blew my mind is, I think, the way that the conversation is happening in the media is like it's all or nothing, right? But my students, we developed some really great solutions to it, and now they're prepared to write that up to send to our state legislators. Now, I think the question next is, will our state legislators take value in that, right? Because I think the conversation that's happening now is arming school teachers, and if you ask school teachers,
they don't want it.
And if you ask students, they don't want it, right? So the question is, it's not enough to empower our students, right? Because you can talk about writing letters all day, right? But the question is, do we have folks in the State House who are willing to take these letters, read these letters, and say, you know what, I might have an opinion about something, but this is not something I face every day, right? I'm not in the classroom every day facing this issue.
Absolutely.
And will they listen, and will they be willing to, this word compromise have been sent out a lot, right? In terms of, will you compromise with the left side, or will you compromise with the right side? But for me, the word compromise is, are you willing as a state representative or a federal government official to compromise with the people that you're working for?
I'm just totally stumped by people considering, again, that guns are the answer to guns.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
that just blows my mind.
I think that's interesting.
The only way to solve one gun is to go buy another one and arm somebody else.
Yeah,
that just can't be logical to me.
Yeah, well, and I struggle with that a lot too, because I think it's easy for a lot of us who are in more privileged situations to talk about guns without recognizing there are some communities out there who need guns. Right, and I think it's important for us to be honest with that, right? And I think it's important for us to also be genuine in who is asking really for the removal of guns, right? And are they really the ones who are being affected by guns, or who really need guns for that whole idea of self-protection?
I'm a Marine, okay? Just to kind of preface this, I'm a Marine. A lot of untrained people out here running around with guns. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
You know, accidental shootings, things of that nature come from parents being irresponsible and leaving them out and their children getting to them. That has nothing to do with a school shooting.
100%.
You know, a robbery, a guy coming up to rob you with a gun has nothing to do with a school shooting. It has something to do with gun laws and who are receiving guns. I can go and try to buy a car, and I get more scrutiny than buying a gun, because I can walk in a gun store with a kid, I'll just try it. Got a hat on, a hoodie just like you, got his ID, and he wants that gun. The guy says, okay, let me see your ID. He walks out of there with the gun. But that same guy comes in a bank with his statements. Right? He got his check statements, he got his job, he got it. And they give him more scrutiny to be productive. To be productive than to go and say, hey, I'm arming myself. I just think something's wrong with that.
Yeah.
That picture, you know. Maybe I'm crazy, London. What do you got? Maybe it's me, man.
No, you're right. I mean,
maybe it's me.
A house, anything
of value to your life is hard to get.
What they say, you can get all these different loans, but a business loan,
boy,
it's amazing. But again,
that's just I don't get it.
As I'm researching candidates, and I'm actually, your race is one of the races that I'm researching, because I know you're incumbent, I know your opponent, so I like all three of you. So I have to really go through and do pros and cons. Now you seem to be that you're going to be able to work with the young. What's your district like? Give me the areas of your district.
So I think a lot of folks don't know this, but District 55. So last year we had a lot of things happening within our judicial court system to sort of redistrict things.
Absolutely.
So previously 55 had a lot of land area, but it's been shifted a lot. So it currently includes 5 Points South, Southside, Glen Iris. And then it goes westward into Fairfield, Inslee, but it's also now expanded into parts of English Village as well. So it used to be, once you went down, sort of, I think you had brought up Vulcan earlier.
Right.
It sort of stopped right there.
Right.
But now you can sort of take the left where I think that's a Walgreens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can go about half a mile, maybe a mile down. It also includes all those households there now. So they've cut out really, anything north of Fairfield,
right.
So Adamsville, Forestdale, Graysville, they've cut that area out.
That area is out now.
And that was going to my point. Can you relate to the seasoned voters, I guess you could say?
Civil rights voters.
Civil rights vote. Can you, being a relatively unknown, out of the three, because the other two kind of are known somewhat in the city, how can you relate to them, or do you think you can? I know you think you can, but can you relate to them in a way that they can get your vote?
So I think it's important for me to be very honest with you, right? So one, I'm going to say I don't believe I'm unknown. I do think that there are lots of different pockets, right, of people within District 55, right? Because in our kickoff video, one of the things I said is, one of the things that really drives me to run for District 55 is that there is so much color and texture to our district, right? And what I've really come to find out over the last couple months is there are folks within the Black community, within the white community as well, who do organizing and political work from different spectrums, right? And so we just connected through JP, right?
Absolutely.
So John Paul and I, we've known each other for a long time. He trusts me enough to speak at my kickoff event. And so and even in my work with President Obama's campaign, there are a lot of folks within the community, the more seasoned voters that you say that I have worked with before,
right.
But because I've sort of approaching organizing and politics from a different perspective, it's not necessarily that people don't know me, but I'm having to be honest with you. I'm having to rely on folks who I've worked with before to say, this guy has been doing this work, right?
Right.
You haven't seen the work that he's done because you're doing it from a different perspective, right? But that does not mean he's not doing this work. That he hasn't been sort of beneficial in the way that he's approached the organizing and the coalition building that he's done for really the last 8 or 9 years of his life.
Right. No, I get it, because in politics you have to show what you're doing, and that's always been weird to me, because I'm one of the kind of guys, I'll tell you, I'll push a broom, meaning what that means is I can be in the background and don't need all of the
100%.
publicity for it, because I feel I can get more done.
Well, see, that is why we do this show, because if you notice, there's the rock star appeal that I mean. With a politician, you rarely see a rock star until he comes to perform. And that's what usually happens with our political officials. We don't see you until it's time to perform. So, anyway, but we hear the good side and all that. But what are the adversity? Because it has to be. There's always an adversity with the first. It's like us in this show. There's adversity being the first. What adversities are you facing being the first Asian running in a predominantly African American district?
I think again, just being very transparent, and honest with you. I think,
please.
For me, so in 2016, I was lucky to win an award presented by President Obama called the White House Champion of Change. Right. Cool. So it was presented to 10 Asian American Pacific Islanders from across America who have done work to build coalitions amongst people of different races, ethnicities, genders, all across sort of the identity spectrum. And so I think the struggle for me is that there is a large divide is the wrong word, but I think there are certain conversations that Asian Americans and Black Americans that we haven't had yet, right? We just finished the Civil Rights Unit in my AP Government class, and one of the things that so again, Shades Valley is so unique in that we have a large population of Black students as well as Hispanic students, white students, Asian students. One of the things that I was very clear on is because we really went through sort of all the channels when we talk about civil rights, right? And being very intentional in saying, there would be no Asian America without Black America, right? But then that is not sort of dilute some of the experiences that we've had as two communities, right? When I think of the LA riots, right? When I think about the Asian American police officer who was convicted for the murder of a Black man in New York, and the Asian American community stepped up and we said, white people have been murdering people, murdering Black people all the time. Why is it this one Asian guy? And so the one moment, right, that as an Asian American community that we stepped up and we said we're going to fight for social justice and equal rights was like the wrong moment, right? So when I say. So when you ask, what is the biggest adversity that I'll show, that I'll sort of face, is being able to understand the context within the Black and Asian community, and being able to have conversations to go over that. My mom is a small business owner, so she's owned a nail salon in Roebuck for the last 10 years now, and so. T&T Nails, shout out. It's right next to.
We'll be sending them.
Tell Mama we coming.
Yeah, right on the exit there. And I'll be honest in saying that my mom has faced a tremendous amount of. I don't want to say racism, but of discrimination herself, being an Asian American woman who owns a business in a Black community, right? And so, there have been times where, she'll come home frustrated, and we have to have conversations and say, Mom, we have to understand that, we are not here without Black Americans, right? But it's also difficult for us being immigrants to this country, and being able to have those conversations really genuinely.
And I think with the immigrant thing, it's just being immigrants for a shorter period of time, and that's the only difference.
And I love the way you said that. Yeah,
and really, that's the only difference, because all of us are immigrants in just the time period of how long we were immigrants over here. It is amazing that you say Asian Americans face discrimination, because something I thought about. Me, I'm out of the box. You go into an Asian American restaurant, you notice that people never tip, and you ever wondered why? Because they figure they own the place anyway.
Yeah, 100%.
But isn't that a form of discrimination? Because it could be a teenager that's in there actually working, that's no kin to these people, that are actually at a job. Yeah. But to show you the mindset of us and how we think, and I think like that because I lived in Southern California for 15 years.
Oh, what part?
San Diego.
Yeah, okay, nice.
Right in La Jolla, right in this area. Yeah. So I got to say, when I left Alabama and I went to California, I see a melting pot, and I'm like, oh my God, you know what I mean? So interracial is normal. There's nothing to it. You know, ain't nobody, when you walk in the mall, ain't nobody staring at you like, oh my God, because plus it's a military town. So you're always going to have, I just want so bad for Alabama to feel that way because, you know, we're dealing with global, and just to see him now mention discrimination, the same thing that we talk about.
Yeah.
So there's nothing new to I guess all of us have the same problems in the world, just a matter of communicating about it.
100%.
Well, one thing I want you to, it was funny that one of my favorite authors was on the screen a few minutes ago. Oscar Brown, one of my favorite poems is I Apologize. In this poem, he's apologizing for being black.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But he's standing in a way that, okay, you know, I'm not going to, basically he's saying I'm not going to apologize when he's doing his poem. I don't want you to get to the point to where you apologizing for being Asian. And I know we're bringing it out because you are the first.
Yeah.
That's exciting in itself. But you're also qualified. I spoke in depth with you. I spoke with your other candidates. You can stick with them just as well. Don't apologize for who you are. If you can do your job, do your job. And I say that because during our forum, we will ask, why are you having an Asian?
Right.
Why are you having a white person?
Yeah,
And see, they forget that I'm not politically correct. Yeah. And my wife would tell you in a second, she said, London, you got to have a filter.
And you're not necessarily political.
I'm not necessarily political. Meaning that don't question what we do. You know, we were told, I had someone say, maybe next time you're doing it in a smaller venue.
Yeah.
I said, no, maybe next time more people will come and support.
Right.
We gave a free venue.
Right.
But then you question the people we have there when you had every opportunity. Right. So today you're going to start seeing two different people here where we're tired of apologizing for trying to do voter education. You're paving a road just like we're paving a road.
100%.
When you get, if you win, and I'm sure as a candidate, you're going to say you're going to win. When you win, do what you're supposed to do. Now, I could care less after Quang no wins if you're Asian. I don't care about that.
Now you're
a
representative of District 55.
So with that, what's your first two laws, if any, that you have in mind? Give me your first two, maybe.
Fantastic. So our campaign platform is centered around three ideas, right? And I really loved the event that y'all had on Monday because we had an opportunity to sort of share it for the first time, right? You know, we talked about educate, reform, empower, right? Mm-hmm. To really fix our education system, right? We have to reform what's happening outside the classroom to empower our communities to fix what's inside the classroom, right? And so when we talk about two specific pieces of legislation, number one, I think about minimum wage, and I'm going to be very honest in saying that for me, part of me running is being full-time in the classroom now. I realize that there's so much that our community leaders, our principals, our teachers do, right? That at the end of the day, and I use this story all the time. My daughter goes to Glen Iris. So, you know, my daughter is she is a straight A student. Holla, Ellie. She's a straight A student. And Glen Iris, you know, Dr. Wolf at Glen Iris is one of the most fantastic administrators I've ever met in my life. And I, you know, as a spoken word poet and as a teaching artist, I was able to travel to over 100 schools nationally. I've spoken at the Alabama State Council on the Arts. And what I've realized is, at the end of the day, you can take a young man or a young woman from, you know, Birmingham City Schools or Jefferson County, you can put them in Vestavia, you can put them in Mountain Brook, you can put them in Hoover, but nothing changes, right, when that mother or that father is having to work 60, 80 hours a week, right? When that mother and father is coming home exhausted and doesn't have time to schedule one-on-one meetings with the parent, with the teacher, right? When that car breaks down, right, and that is the only car that the family has, and that student can't go to school because a school system decides to, you know, end busing because it was quote unquote a waste of resources, right? Nothing changes. So number one, I think what we need to do is provide more avenues for our parents, regardless of what job they're having, right, to be available in the classroom for their students. So I think number one, the key there is to raise minimum wage. I think the second piece to that is to have a firm commitment to a state-funded children's health insurance program, right? So I know there's some conversations happening now,
right.
But at the end of the day, CHIP's existence in the state of Alabama is only due to federal funding, right? And we know that in today's political climate, right, regardless of there's a Democrat or Republican or Libertarian, whoever is in the federal, running our federal government, we cannot wait for the federal government to save us, right? And so maybe President Trump will, hopefully not, but maybe he'll win again in 4 years, and we still have no federal funding for CHIP, right? And so the two pieces of legislation that I would pass is one is a firm commitment from our state government to fund CHIP for the next 15 to 20 years. The second piece that I will ask is for our minimum wage to continually increase with cost of living.
Now, you do know this is Montgomery we're talking about, which is another different animal.
Yeah.
Once you enter into Montgomery, you enter into the Good Old Boy Network. How would you navigate the Good Old Boy Network in Montgomery? Because once you write this bill, you got to work to get this thing passed. It's some work, which means you have to cross party lines, basically become a great negotiator.
Yeah.
Do you have that ability?
I'm going to give you, before I answer that, one of the things that I've been very privileged to say is that, because I've worked with so many young people, that, my greatest success has not been, how much money we've raised or how their GPA has increased or the scholarship that they've gotten, but really what they've done after they've left sort of working with me. So I have several young people who are now working in Montgomery, right? And the first thing I'll say is when I first announced my run, a young student of mine, I'm not going to say his name because he does work for a GOP candidate,
gotcha.
Who is currently in a seat that he will probably get again. So but he told me, he called me and he said, Coach, I'm so glad you're running. There are things that we disagree on, but a couple months ago, we were having conversations on repealing the grocery sales tax, right? And so, grocery tax, more than anything, I think hurts poor and underserved communities. And he said, so, this is something that all Alabamians care about. But in that state House of Representatives, you had all the Democrats there, right? But you had 30 Republicans there.
Right.
And he said, a state representative pulled me over and said, hey, I will give you $20 right now if you can run to my office to grab my Nintendo DS. And I say that to say, yeah, to grab my Nintendo DS.
Right.
Yeah, and then he said afterwards, after they were done presenting this bill, because there was no one in the House, right, that they were pressing each other's buttons. Literally, representatives who were not there, right, were getting their votes, and their justification is, well, we know what they're going to vote in anyways, so don't worry about that, right? So when you ask me this question of how am I going to sort of compromise and work across the aisle, I think the number one thing I'll say is that there are certain things that I'll compromise on, right? There's conversations that we're having on how do we increase state tax revenue, because that's something that we need. I will compromise and talk about that, right? I will work with you on that. But I think it's important for us to have someone in the state house, really in our state government, willing to have these conversations and say, listen, you want me to compromise, but you're not even going to be there, right? And using the communication channels that we have, right, to say, oh, by the way, we wanted to have a conversation on the grocery tax bill, but here are the state representatives who weren't there, right? Or present it in committees, right, and have a conversation and say, here are the state representatives who disagreed with this, and here's why they disagreed with this, right? And so I think for me, it's not as important to sort of necessarily go across the aisle in a sense of really keeping them accountable. Because at the end of the day, for an example, if District 55 says, Representative Doe, we want to increase minimum wage to $12.50 an hour, okay? And I work with with stakeholders from all over District 55 in Alabama to build up this bill, and I present it on the floor, right? And there are, and we get 70% no votes, right? I think it's my duty as a state legislator, whether or not I agree that is what we need or not, right? For me to say, go back to my communities and say, hey, District 48, District 17, District 23, here are the districts that disagreed with us,
right.
And here's what I need you to do so we can work together to go into these communities, into these districts, to convince them, to convince their state legislators to get this done. Patricia Todd, over the last couple of weeks, she has come out and she said, all these bills that we've been passing, I've been trying to pass these bills, right? And they're just taking ownership over it. And for me, I'm okay with that in a sense, right? So it's not, and you have brought this up, this idea of like being a celebrity, right? Saying, I got this done, right? To me, that's not really important, right? So if I write the bill and it doesn't, my name doesn't necessarily have to be the sponsor for it, right? If a GOP, behind closed doors says, Quang, I really like this bill, but unfortunately because, our state party, I can't vote yes for you, it's like, you take it. Right. And I think about is marijuana legalization, right? Everyone knows that every person, I don't say every person, probably 55, 60%, I think a recent polls released, 55% of Alabamians want marijuana legalization. I think it's like 65% want marijuana decriminalization, right? If the citizens are saying that, why are the state legislators saying no? And I think it's also important to understand that our state legislators, they are not the ones developing the bills. Let's be very clear on that, right? It's ALEC, right?
So it's not them.
Most of our bills aren't them, right? If there is a,
Did you say ALEC? I want to stop.
Yeah.
Well, we cannot assume people know what these acronyms mean. Right. So ALEC is who?
So ALEC is they pitch themselves as a nonprofit organization. They are essentially a super PAC, right? And what they do is every summer, they host this extravagant party in D.C., in Florida, in New York, and they invite state legislators, and they say, hey, here's some bills that you should pass. We've done all the hard work for you, all right? And if you pass this, we'll make sure to donate some money to you. And so a lot of the legislation that we pass, there's on votesmart.org, there is a ranking system that they have that sort of lists the influence of lobbying groups and interest groups in state government. For the past 10 years, Alabama has been in the top 5, right? So we are in a state that says we don't have enough money for CHIP, right? We are in a state that says we don't have enough money for public education. Yet we are willing to allow groups like ALEC, right? And other super PACs to spend millions and millions of dollars giving it to campaigns, right, and developing legislation that our candidates will then vote on.
D.C., you said the area, right?
Yeah, well, ALEC has a national network, but they have a tremendous amount of influence in Montgomery. And I think anyone who knows state politics knows that Montgomery is driven by lobbyists and interest groups and PACs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because one of the bills I want to work on this year, I'm actually working on now, is the decriminalization of marijuana and legalization.
Sounds like you're talking to the wrong group.
No, and that's what I said. That was one of the first names that came up was ALEC. Because they were like, well, you got to deal with them. I'm like, no, I don't think I should have to. But they was like, no, in Alabama, this is like, I'm like, good grief, I see why we're not getting anything done.
So just for me, we have been, let's just say the last 20 years with me, I'll say 10 in radio. I've never heard a representative mention ALEC.
He's not bought up yet.
It could be. I mean, just think about it. I mean, and everybody that's listening, I hope y'all are with me. I call myself pretty astute in politics.
Exactly.
I try to keep up. Montgomery's always been a foreign animal.
They're not the only one now. There's a couple more.
There's more, yeah. But ALEC
I have interviewed many a state rep, and I've never ever heard ALEC, but I've always seen them going to D.C.
But what are they saying? Am I not really doing my job that you elected me for, or am I just saying, hey, ALEC, can you write this for me? Okay, here you go. 100%. That's basically what it's saying.
So minimum wage could have been a bill that could have been down there years ago. If ALEC said it needed to be there.
Right, but they wouldn't.
Wow.
Right.
You know, we were talking about I posted about the young blonde girl online about the gun violence. You know, this is one, we're coming after you.
Right.
And I say that for a purpose because if you ever, it's a show. There was a newspaper, and then at the end, the women are all going against him. They chose the blonde to speak because it's aesthetically to the public.
Right.
Well, it's how can I say? I'm trying to choose my words exactly. Never mind. I'll come back to him.
Wait a minute, man. I'm still on the. Alec, that just is mind blowing because we have legislators that have been down there for numerous years, and we have some that are going unopposed.
Right.
I mean, nobody is like everything is okay. Wow.
And I think the issue there is no one's having those conversations, right?
Obviously not.
And I told we had our campaign staff meeting on Sunday, and I told them, you know, one of the things that we want to do is run a campaign that is community grassroots driven, right? So we're not going to take any money from corporations. We're not going to take any money from super PACs. We're not going to take any money from anyone who might influence the way that we approach advocating for our community, right? And you know, we have every faith that we can win because I have knocked over the past month or so, every Saturday morning, my daughter and I will walk around, knock on doors, just introduce ourselves, right? And everyone has told us that more than anything, they're looking for something different, right? But they're looking for someone who's honest and genuine, who isn't necessarily not unwilling to compromise, because I am, right? Because I think as a teacher, right, more than anything is, you know, a student might say something that I completely disagree with, right? But it's not my job to say you're wrong. My job is to say, okay, let's have a conversation about that, right? Why do you believe that? You know, what is the data, the news, and things that you've talked about? And I think it's important for us to be really honest with how we keep our politicians accountable, right? Our state legislators accountable. And I think, you know, I think you, Lonnie, you said because they're all of them are getting paid.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but I think even within our district, right, if you look at some of the legislation that has been passed, and then you look at the funding that, you know, that has been received either prior to or immediately after, you can see the influence, right, that these organizations have had. But because it's everyone, right? I have gotten calls from state legislators who said, we really like you, we want to endorse you, but we can't yet.
Wow.
Right? And because they have not gotten the approval from certain organizations, right? The candidates who I've gotten the most feedback from are those who are running in competitive races. So after, you know, even in the middle of the debate during Monday, you know, Mayor Maddox stepped up and said, Quang is right. Right? Quang is right. If we want to fix our education system, we have to focus on what's happening outside of the classroom. Yeah. Right? But those who are already in power, they have called me and said, we love what you're saying. We want you down in Montgomery because we can't do this, right? Because we are so tied, but we also can't publicly endorse you yet until we get approval from these groups. And again, for me, I understand that, right? I understand that there has to be some compromise in getting things done. But one of the things I will not compromise on are my values and what I have always stood for.
Right. Wow.
I lost my.
I just blew y'all's mind.
Hey, you know what?
I lost my train of thought. I can't get it back. It's bugging me, man. I had a good point.
To hear a young guy understand the art of communication is refreshing.
Thank you.
You know, because
you like it's the
I feel you keep calling me young, but I feel old because like
you kind of act like an old guy. You told me your age.
He's not bragging, but he had 3 of the 4 Democratic governors that actually want to approve.
I know.
I didn't say Lonnie said that, but
I said
Lonnie said.
I told you it's a different Lonnie.
Lonnie likes to tell secrets.
Lonnie is a secret teller.
It's a big mouth selection, brother.
Lonnie, wait on the secret. Wait on the secret.
We've had multiple folks who've come.
I mean, it's just kind of refreshing because you know you're the first that I've heard to just be willing to go down there and compromise. You know, some of our legislators go down there. Well, I'm not, and it's now. It seems like a great act. It's one of the greatest acts of all time because the lobbying group probably told you not to do it anyway.
right?
Let's call it
So
negotiation. Not say compromise. Let's say
Okay.
negotiate.
Well, compromise is a negotiation.
Yeah, but compromise is
I mean, but if you're
different
not
term.
compromising your values, it's. I mean, we're talking about policies. You know,
Well,
we're not talking about values.
But here's why I struggle with the word compromise. And I was expecting, a question along the lines of, how are you going to compromise with the other side of the aisle, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, one of the core democratic values of American democracy is majority rule with minority rights,
Right.
And I think it's important for us to be clear on what that means, because a lot of times it means, if you're the minority, you have to bend to the will of the majority. When in actuality, no, right? Majority right, minority rule, what that actually means is the majority party, regardless of how small the minority party is or how much influence or power they have,
Right.
they have to be the ones who are willing to compromise, right?
Right.
It's not, because if you have no power, right, how are we going to compromise with anybody?
Right.
Which is why, I think it's important for someone who's down there to say, here are the things I'm willing to compromise on, right? But then being very clear on saying, here's some things that you need to give us.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you're not willing to give it to us, let's be very direct and honest and intentional in communicating with our communities why. Right? There are a couple of things that I struggle with. One of the things as I was developing my lesson plan for this year is I wanted to show my seniors how our state government works. I will give someone, I would say $1 million, but I'm a teacher, so everyone knows how much I make. I will give someone $100 if they can find me a recording of a full legislative session. You can't.
You will not.
You can find a live stream.
Right.
Right. But
Right.
If you are working 7 to 5, 8 to 5, like most of those who live in Alabama do you have time to take a 3 or 4 hour lunch break to live stream a state legislative session? You don't. Right? So when we talk about keeping each other accountable, this basic things that we can do to really create, the empower piece, right, of our platform is, you can't empower a community to do stuff when they don't have the full knowledge, right? It's easy for you as a state legislator or as a federal legislator to come and say, here's what happened behind the scenes, right? But how can a community, right, keep you accountable, because you could have just made the whole thing up. Right? Unless all of that is transparent and open.
Okay, somebody in Montgomery is getting stuff done. Why can't someone go to that person and say, how do you do that? How do you accomplish laws? How do you get things, passed? How do you do that? I have never heard anyone say that I'm going to go to that person and get it done. You get what I'm saying? Because for President Obama to pass that health care, and they've been trying to do that for just about every president has.
Absolutely.
Somebody had to go and say, okay, what do you want? And you're saying similar things to it, but why not go to that one that can get things done and say, teach me or help me, because this is what I want for my people. Because there's no difference between Republican and Democrat, and I'm just tired of even faking like it is.
It's finally the truth.
Right?
It's
no difference. It's no difference.
It
right?
is the only difference. Your tax bracket.
Tax bracket.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with that, but I see the general sentiment you're coming
I mean,
from.
generally though, tax bracket, because they vote tax
really
bracket
is no
issues.
different.
But they vote tax bracket issues, and Democrats try to make you feel like they're trying to take care of the poor, but that's not true.
But that's not true either.
It is.
What can you do to get something done nowadays?
Well, I think I love that question, because more than anything, I think our campaign, right, and what we're trying to do is truly different, right? So when we say that we are trying to run on a certain level or a different level of expectation, a different level of vision than anyone else, is what we're saying is, I don't believe that politics should work behind closed doors. Right. I believe that a state legislator, obviously, the way I think about it is a state legislator has 3 roles, right? They vote on bills, they propose bills, and then they vote on the budget. Okay. But I think you could easily say, what does a radio host do? They get guests, ask questions, and they say goodbye to guests, right? But if I ask y'all, what do you do, right? You would say that you're really trying to start a conversation. Right, you're really trying to build a community and a movement, right?
Information sharing.
Yeah, information sharing, right? So for me, obviously those are the 3 main duties that they have. But again, I think that, and I think my experience shows this, right? I'm a I am a national chair for the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. The way that I view a state legislator position is not necessarily only doing those three things.
No.
My broader vision is having a state legislator who can set an example for everyone else to do things differently, right? And the key word there is empower, right? It's not promising, hey, I'm going to get all these things done.
Right.
And then when you don't get those things done, you come back and say, it's not my fault. Right? One of the things I've been pushing with my young men is the word ownership, right? You got to take ownership over certain things when you mess up, right? And you can't just point fingers. And so I think what you said is perfect. Is I want to be that state legislator to say, to go into the community and say, I don't necessarily know exactly what you want, but here are the things I believe that, after talking to everybody, here are the things that I believe that we need. Now, if you want to get these things done, here's how we can work together to accomplish this goal, right? Because then it keeps me accountable, but it also keeps the community accountable, right? Because it's very easy for those in the community to point fingers and say, oh, this representative lied to me, or this representative didn't call me back, or this representative didn't do what he told me to do, right?
Be careful, because when you say accountability, Julia's antennas pop up. I have a question.
You wonder why I'm working on this
on
campaign?
Scotty Johnson says, what laws are important to him?
Him being
you. Not me, brother. I'm not running.
Yeah. So, so for me, and you had brought up when you originally asked your question, Lonnie, I thought I was going to go to another track. You had said, who can I go to for certain things, right? For me, I don't know, and I might be wrong in this. Again, I'd like to think I'm very well versed on these things, because if you, I think we all have kids in this room. If you try to BS a 16, 17, 18-year-old,
They just sniff it out fast.
they will call you out.
Right, yeah. It's sniff it out fast.
For me, because I have worked in education, I've worked in college. I won the 2015 Alabama Spirit Diversity Award, given to the student affairs practitioner in the state of Alabama who's done the most work to build initiatives and policies for marginalized communities. For me, any law that has a direct impact to education is what is important to me. So again, I think of certain things, and the way that we've really talked about this in our campaign is, I say education, but it's not just what's in the classroom, right? Absolutely. So for me, I'm a single father. I'm very happy and grateful to have a wonderful co-parent who we work very well together. And I don't want to say I know the struggles of a single parent, but for me, laws that are specifically helping and addressing, one, our education system, but two, helping our families, right? At the end of the day, I cannot point a finger at any state representative to say, this person is fighting for us every single day, right? This person cares more about the success of our families than small businesses, right? Or for corporations or things like that. And for me, I'm not saying that small businesses is not important. Again, my mom has been, she has been, she raised, two very loud and outspoken Asian men by herself. And she is a small business owner. So I do care about small business. I do. But I think there are enough state legislators out there who are advocating for issues for economic development and legislators, right? So for me, the laws that I care about are ones that are directly talking about low-income, middle-class working families that can help our education system, right? Because again, you can bring in a Walmart, and I'll talk District 55 for an example, right? You can bring in a Walmart, right, which will create jobs, right? But then what happens when Walmart leaves? Right?
That's never happened before, has it?
Yeah, it's crazy. Never, never, right? But if you build an education system, right, that can create a culture of folks who are financially literate, right, who know how to run a business, right, then we don't need a Walmart, right? We can have. I always say, so in the neighborhood I live in, we have a Wilson's. So Wilson's is it's right across the street from Dreamland.
Right.
So if you've ever been to Dreamland, I love the guys at Wilson's.
Right.
I always say I would rather have 20 Wilsons
Right.
than one
Than
Walmart.
one Walmart.
Right?
Right.
Now there are folks who are in the state house who might disagree with me on that. So again, for me, any law that's specifically addressing the needs of our middle class and working families. And so, off the top of my head, we've talked about minimum wage, we've talked about CHIP. I think that there should be mandated sick days for anyone who works 40 hours, right? I know I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want to get too emotional. One of the things I love about coaching soccer, especially at the school that I do, is that we have such a broad diversity of young men. So some of the young men that we have come from very rich families. Some of the young men that we have, they are working just to stay in school.
Absolutely.
And for me to see some of these young men who want to be on the soccer team, but they say, Coach, I can't because my mom had surgery last month and she hasn't been able to work, so I've had to pick up a couple shifts, right? Or, hey, her car broke down, sorry I missed practice today, I literally had no other way to go to school, right? So for me, those are the issues that I care about.
Got me. I'm a football coach, so I know I spent a lot of money, man, watching kids that just couldn't eat. You got to feed them one day, man. So that's pretty cool, Doc. Hey, man, the good people tend to get looked over because they're not rock stars, but that's because they're out there working. Quang Do, he's District 55. I think one of the coolest interviews of a politician I've had, man. That's pretty cool. You're not a politician guy, and we appreciate that. We got about another 4 minutes. If anybody on the web got a question, or if you got one, man, we're going to let him wrap up. Got about 4 minutes.
They do, man, but I think it'll take it
it'll take a while.
Let
me ask you this, and then just kind of lighten this a little bit. Predatory lending came in because of a lot of the state legislators, man. And I've watched a lot of our seniors be indebted to these folks. Could you or would you be able to do anything about predatory lending out of Montgomery if you got there?
I will do everything I can to
It's probably too late.
I will do everything I can to address that.
Yeah.
Predatory lending is something that hits close to my heart.
Right.
So when my mother first started going and saying, because she had worked as an employee for different salons for a while, and eventually she said, you know what, I really want to open up my own nail salon. And my brother and I, we were fully supportive of it. She had brought up, we don't have enough money to get a loan right now. I'm thinking about putting our car note up just for the down payment.
Right.
And luckily, because my brother and I, we had an education system that allowed us to be able to comprehend some of the things that she was signing.
Yeah.
So I think there are two ways we can address predatory lending, right? So one is I think we can address it in terms of legislation that limits the control that they have. Right.
Absolutely.
And there is a couple of state representatives who I have talked to, and who some of the folks on our campaign team have talked to, who for a while there, that was their thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They haven't said a word about it in the last year or two. Right. And they have been very verbal in saying it's not possible. Okay. So if that side isn't possible, the next thing that we have to talk about is financial literacy. Right. Predatory lending can only exist, right, when folks don't know what they're getting into.
Absolutely.
Right. So again, when we talk about community and coalition building, a lot of things that we have to be very intentional on is understanding that predatory lending is a two-sided issue. Right. One is an education piece to it. Right. You got to educate folks on what it means. Right. When you sign those contracts. Right. What a 50% APR loan means.
Right.
Right. Then on the other side of it, we have to be able to be very intentional in saying who is voting to allow predatory lending to stay in our state, right? So again, as involved as you are, could you tell me the 15, 20, 30 legislators who are okay with predatory lending?
No.
You can't, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is a problem, right?
Absolutely.
If you are going to be a representative who is saying, this is my platform, right? This is what I care about. This is what I'm going to fix.
Right.
You cannot go down to Montgomery, right, and then come back and say, sorry, we can't do it, right? You got to say, I was not able to achieve this, right? And here are the folks who wanted this to stay in place.
Right.
Now it's our duty, right? It's my duty as a state representative to address these issues, but it's our duty to now go into these communities. When I say our duty, I mean stakeholders and stakeholders and nonprofits and things like that, to really go into the other communities, to really build a coalition of folks who can all agree on this, right? And then at that point, what ends up happening is you then lose those state legislators, and you then put in state legislators who care about these issues, who are no longer beholden to ALEC, right? To get to a point where we can address it from both sides.
Justice reform. Give me 30 seconds.
Say that one more time.
Justice reform.
30
What
seconds.
are your plans about justice reform?
So two pieces. One, when we talk about justice reform, I think about restorative justice, right? So I think about the way that we're having the opioid epidemic conversation. We need to also go back in and look at the way we treat men and women who have succumbed to heroin, who have succumbed to crack cocaine, because the same biological mechanisms that affect those who are addicted to painkillers are the same mechanisms for folks who are heroin and crack and cocaine, right? But we're much nicer to one and not so nice to the other, and I think it's honest. We need to be honest on why, right? The second piece is I believe that everyone who is released from prison should be restored voting rights, right? At the end of the day, our justice system should be restorative, right? So if you are releasing someone from prison and they're not restored, then they need to stay there, right? But if you are truly saying that our prison system is rehabilitating folks, right? If they are rehabilitated, why can't they vote once they're out of prison?
Absolutely.
If they're not rehabilitated, then they need to stay in there until they are. So I would say that those are immediately to my mind the two things I would advocate for.
Well, Quang, District 55, great conversation.
Thank you so much. And just last thing I would say, again, we are running a campaign where we're not getting any money from super PACs or corporations. So please check out our website. It's QUANGDO. So Quang for district55.com. As well as check out our Facebook page, same thing, QUANGDO for district55.com. We cannot win this fight without you, and we need every dollar, every cent that you can give, because again, you can check my salary on the state educator's website, and you know exactly how much money I make, and so we're really trying to run a campaign with support from folks from all over this state, this district, and this country.
Well,
and also our kickoff event is this upcoming Wednesday. It'll start at 5:30. We have some fantastic folks. We have Sean Judah, who is an incredible MC, one of my best friends, who will be hosting. John Paul Taylor, who will be speaking as well as Melody Stone, who has done really fantastic work in terms of advocating for women's rights, LGBTQ rights, as well as for midwifery and doulas in the state of Alabama. So
cool, man.
Well, you have a couple people on here: Trudy Hunter, Scotty Johnson, Stephanie Carter, that you might want to go back through the comments and kind of speak to them. They, like I said, they had a couple of questions that were just. We probably had to go about another hour.
And if we miss you, that's why we always put it up on the Facebook page, not necessarily political, so the candidates can go back and answer it just in case they missed it. But y'all pass this along, please.
Like us and share us at Not Necessarily Political with James Williams, Lonnie Malone. YouTube, like and subscribe and share us at Not Necessarily Political with James Williams, Lonnie Malone. On Instagram, Not Necessarily Political. On Twitter, we're Twitter live now at Necessarily Not. And if you want to come on the show or ask questions or sponsor any future events, you can look us up at notnecessarypolitical@gmail.com. And we check all of our emails.
We really do. We're not going to keep on talking. I enjoyed this interview again. We did 2 in a row. That was nice. 2 good ones in a row. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.